In the meantime, again, a confession as a recovering diplomat, the first thing you try to do is you sit down with the other side and you say, we're very pleased that our two leaders are going to meet. We have modestly taken our hand at trying to draft a joint communique. It's just a draft joint communique. It doesn't mean that we're expecting to announce this, but we want to work with you on something that would ensure that our two leaders have a successful meeting. That's how kind of diplomats do things. So it's pretty clear this was not done. And so as we got closer to Singapore, it was frankly really no idea of what the North Koreans were prepared to do. And I can tell you, because some of my friends were asked, friends and former colleagues were asked to talk to the North Koreans, and there were some meetings up in Pyongyang. And as they suggested some joint communique language, the North Koreans said, no, we're not interested. We don't sense that your president is either, and therefore we're just going to go. And they didn't use the term wing it, but that's exactly what they had in mind. I mention all this because when you have a summit, two presidents, and they have really quite surprisingly and pleasantly pulled a rabbit out of the hat, and you say, oh my goodness, what progress. How did you do that? Because, you know, rabbits don't live in hats. So when politicians pull rabbits out of a hat, it usually means that some diplomatic team spent weeks stuffing the rabbit down the hat. Please stay in that hat until we have the meeting. Well, so the president goes to Singapore. And in fact, Julie and I were in New York that night, and I was out at 3 in the morning. I was at NBC studio. And the president said in a little walk he was taking in the garden with Kim Jong-un that, by the way, we're going to have an announcement soon. No one knew what the announcement was. And again, what you try to do with these announcements is you give it out to the press. It's embargoed until the time in which the two presidents meet. And the press always observes that. I mean, there's, I think, rarely been an incident where they announce it ahead of time. And the idea is so that when the two presidents meet and sign something, the people, the press already understands it and ready to talk about it. So you really try to assure success even before they sit down. I mean, they can talk about, you know, difficult teenagers, they can talk about, you know, bad hair days, they can talk about whatever they want, but it's already been agreed. So instead, they signed something. And then, and we live in an iPhone era, our president did that, you know, that chainsaw signature and then held it up. And then somebody took an iPhone picture of it. And so I'm sitting in New York, and boom, within about a minute, we get the actual text taken off of an iPhone from a Japanese journalist who sent it to Kyoto News, who sent it to NBC, et cetera. So I start reading through it. And a couple of things caught my mind. They did have the line about North Korea wanting to give up their nuclear weapons, but there was no concept of time. And if anything, it was almost a sort of biblical notion that we'll give up our nuclear weapons at the, you know, the end of time. You know, when the lion lies down with a lamb. By the way, there's a place in Israel where you can see a lion lying down with a lamb. And I remember asking the guy, how do you make that work? He said, well, we put a new lamb in there every day. This was clearly, you know, we weren't there yet in terms of a time marker as to when this would happen. Then the second issue I noticed is you need a kind of follow-on process. And the president correctly had on his side of the draft, he said, and I will dispatch the Secretary of State. Again, I don't think you should start with the Secretary of State. I think you ought to start with someone low, but whatever. I'm not going to, you know, nitpick. But so the president had in mind sending the Secretary of State. And by the way, he had already gone to Pyongyang a couple of times as a CIA director, and he was known to the North Koreans, so I understand that. But on the North Korean side, they just said a player to be named later. So it was pretty clear the North Koreans had not done a lot of thinking about all this. And so to kind of fast forward to the present, North Korea has not taken any moves toward denuclearization as we sit here this morning. North Korea has instead undertaken some sort of random acts. Now, random acts of kindness are a very nice thing. You know, it's nothing more pleasant when someone gives up their taxi to you for no apparent reason. It's a random act of kindness, but a random act of denuclearization doesn't quite work, because what you're trying to do is to get a list of their programs, and the North Koreans have politely and not so politely declined to give a list of their programs, but that's kind of your basic approach to this. The North Koreans say, how can we do that? Because if we give you a list, you'll take it as a targeting list. I submit to you there are ways of giving a list of programs without it being a targeting list. I mean, you don't have to, you know, give the GPS coordinates of each of these facilities. So the North Koreans have failed to give anything in that regard, and instead have said, well, we're going to destroy this engine testing facility. Now, engine testing facilities, one less engine testing facility in North Korea is probably a good day, but the problem is they have other engine testing facilities, and there might be a bunch of reasons why they give up a testing facility because they're closing it and having others. They they agreed to end the Punggye test site. Well, for most people steeped in this stuff, they know that North Korea has tested some 6 nuclear weapons. The first was a fizzle, but the others have been successful. And most people agree that Punggye test site, if they did it once more, the dome would collapse and you'd have nuclear effluence in the air. So probably that wasn't going to suffice as a test facility in the future anyway. So again, good that they're destroying it, not going to use it again, but not something we asked for and not something that's in the context of a denuclearization agreement. So these kind of random acts of denuclearization do not speak to a North Korean willingness to engage with us in a process that leads to denuclearization. Now, on the other side, the Trump administration, as willing as they were to talk to the North Koreans, have also made very clear that, in the words of President Trump, we're not going to repeat the mistakes of those diplomats in the past. We're not going to give sanctions relief until they've completely denuclearized. So the idea is zero sanctions relief. In the meantime, North Korea gives up all their nuclear programs, nuclear weapons, et cetera, and then we'll give them sanctions relief. Well, pretty tough line kind of stuff, but, you know, it's not going to work. And so, again, I think it's the fact of the matter is, I think we need to they take a step, we take a step, and, you know, because there's not a lot of trust in this business. The president has even said he loves Kim Jong-un, and to quote Tina Turner, I'm not sure, you know, what's love got to do with this? I mean, this is really about something else.